Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Burnt Pancakes podcast. I am your host, Katie Fensky, and each week I am here to remind moms that everyone burns their first pancake. Today, I'm sitting down for a momversation with a mother-son duo. I'm speaking with Lynn and Jon Greenberg. They are going to come on and talk to us about dyslexia. Jon was diagnosed with dyslexia when he was 7, and he's going to share what that experience was like. And Lynn's going to talk to us a little bit about what she experienced going through this with her child. Their story is incredible. And as a former classroom teacher, I will say that there was zero training in dyslexia and how to recognize it. And so many times I probably thought that there's maybe a child going through my class that has it, and I just don't have the tools to help them. So hearing their story and hearing how Lynn advocated for her son is really inspiring. This also led them to create a children's book together. So they are co-authoring a book called Robby, the Dyslexic Taxi and the Airport Adventure. And their story is just so inspiring and sweet. So I cannot wait for you to enjoy this one with me. Okay, Jon and Lynn, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having us.
I'm very excited. This is my first mother-son duo on the podcast, so this will be really fun. What a great idea. So let's hear a little bit about your stories. Jon, tell us a little bit about your experience growing up with dyslexia.
Yeah, well, it was challenging at first. Before we knew that I was dyslexic, there was a lot of discomfort for me and overall unpleasantness. A lot of teachers and even some kids, they didn't really give me the time of day. They said I was slow. They said I was tired. I was a boy. They didn't really give me much credit, and that really impacted how I viewed myself afterwards. And so it wasn't until I got tested, and then I found out I was straightforward dyslexic. And frankly, that made me feel a lot better to know that I wasn't just, dumb or slow like people were calling me. So it still was a little confusing because I didn't at the time really understand what it meant to be dyslexic. But now I sort of view it as a bit of a superpower of sorts because it got me to this point in my life where I'm able to create art because while I couldn't read or write, the main way I was able to express myself was through art. And so doing that has really been a boon to me.
I love that. What age were you when you got diagnosed?
7, I believe.
Okay. So that they did catch it because I was a teacher in the classroom for 11 years and I taught outside the classroom. And I will tell you from my college experience, getting my teaching credential, all the classes I took, all the years I taught, never once was I given training on how to recognize dyslexia. And I guarantee there were plenty of kids that probably went through the system that never got a diagnosis. So I guess, Lynn, you can probably speak to this a little bit more. What made did you have to pursue it? Did a teacher talk to you about it?
Yes.
What steps did you take?
So I think, and Jon is, almost 25. So I hope things are a little different, but I have a feeling that maybe they're not, because I think, teachers are expected to know so much. And unfortunately, even the teachers that are, for learning differences, there's so many under that category, we can't possibly expect them all to understand what's going on. And in Jon's case, everyone who came in contact with him was blaming him instead of, like he said, they would say, well, Lynn, he's slow, he's a boy, that's the problem.
All the stereotypes.
Total. Mm-hmm. And Jon is my youngest of 4, and I know everyone has a different learning style, but he just wasn't, learning the way I expected him to within a certain, set of parameters. Right. He could tell me every Thomas the Tank Engine's name, but not that Thomas started with the letter T. And, he didn't want to sing the ABC song. He didn't want to watch Sesame Street. He just, I knew he was really smart. but there was just some disconnect. So I started reading a little bit, and I have a good friend who's a pediatrician. I was asking, and finally I gave up on the school system and found someone to privately test him. And, as John said, turned out he was classic dyslexic.
Okay, it was not hard to, to
No,
diagnose.
no, super smart, and just needed to learn how to read differently.
Yeah. So what are some of the assessments or tests? Like John, do you even remember when you went through the testing, what it was like?
From what I remember, and it was a while ago, there were mostly aptitude and sort of memorization, trying to figure out what I could and couldn't do. There are some of them were very basic. I remember I had to just do memorization games, not games, but like tests.
Okay.
And others were a little more complex and involved sort of like looking at ink blots to a certain degree.
Okay.
I don't know what it's like now. I don't know if it's changed at all or stayed mostly the same, but I remember it took about a week of testing, right? Just to remember, if I remember correctly.
So yes, when children are younger, the person we were fortunate enough to find felt that it was very hard for a child to just sit still for like a day or two and go through the testing.
Yeah.
So she did some testing and then waited, a day or two, did some more testing so that John wasn't overwhelmed. And after the diagnosis, to keep his diagnosis so that he could have extra time on tests and things like that, he had to get tested every 3 years, I think it was, so that he could keep his title, so that he could have extra time. And as time went on, as kids get older, they need to take not just the tests in school, but
driver's
college
test.
boards, driver's tests, all that stuff. And so we had the category and the classification so that he could keep it. But unfortunately, again, the public school system did not want to do that. So, we were fortunate enough that we could find someone to help us. But if you don't fight for what and if you have trouble paying for things like this, it's a huge fight. And we just made a collective family decision to really help figure all this out. And his older siblings, my husband, his father, we all just made a collective decision that we were going to take care of this as a family.
Yeah.
So
well, I bet getting that diagnosis was kind of a relief though. Like, okay, now we have an answer to why this has been so hard. Like I know of dyslexia. I think of flipping letters when you're writing, and memory. Are there other things that parents could look out for that could help identify dyslexia?
So I definitely, and John can obviously speak to this more than I can, but I think it's really important because kids who are dyslexic are often off the charts, very smart. They can also have comorbidities. They can have ADHD. They can have other diagnoses that might make it difficult for them to learn, sitting quietly at a desk, but we don't always as a society acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So I think you need to listen to your child and the verbal and the nonverbal cues. Like John would memorize a story and sort of pretend that he was reading along. Yes. And if I hadn't known better, I would have understood that he was reading it. But
that
also
was kind of like your survival, how you adapted to what school was expecting. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But, then he would, get up in the middle of class and sort of act out. And everyone was, upset with that. And I thought, there's something going on. He's telling me in his own way that he's upset and that he's frustrated because he's he's a good kid and
Yeah.
he normally wouldn't want to be disruptive.
Right.
And that's,
Right.
all of these clues were things that led me to find, to get to look for the diagnosis.
Right.
And
Gosh,
then
I
that
feel
was,
like with my 3 boys, now that I have my own kids, even more so, I'm like, school is not made for children. Like,
no,
especially boys. The fact that we're making them sit for so long
oh my
and
God.
like
Mhm.
so many kids, have ADHD now. If you had them out in the woods, running around, they would never show this behavior, quote unquote, behavior problems.
Yep.
But it's because we're sticking them indoors in a classroom for so long. Yeah, of course you're going to see that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
We need to sort of adapt. There are so many different learning styles,
Mhm.
not just for children with learning differences, but just in general. We all learn differently. And I think, this goes back to the conversation of there are just, too many kids in a classroom for a
100%.
teacher, and
Yeah.
we just don't value teaching, and we
Right.
need to.
Yeah. My son is in kindergarten and he has 30 kids in his class with one teacher, no aide. And you're like, how? Like, how is that? And can you imagine throwing a kid in there with dyslexia, with ADHD? Like, how does the teacher even have time to recognize that?
No,
Like, it's just
they
too much.
don't.
It is.
Yeah.
So props for you for taking it upon yourself, like feeling that mom gut, knowing something's not right. Jon, do you have memories of what it was like being in the classroom and just going, I can't do this.
Well, yes. When I was in class, there was a strong sense of frustration, especially when I was trying my best and everyone else was just zooming along, shall we
Yeah.
say. It wasn't until after the diagnosis that things started to make a little more sense. I did at my original, I was at public school, had a person to help with special needs students, but I don't remember this, but I remember my mom mentioning this
Mhm.
later on. That teacher came up to her and said, "We do not have the resources to properly help you." I'm saying this off the record,
Right.
and
Yep.
so after that, we found a school that was specifically meant to teach dyslexic children. They used a specific teaching style,
Okay.
and also they had fewer students in a class, like you were saying, 30
Yeah.
students in one class. It was for us more like, I think the top was 10.
Okay.
And usually the teachers had assistants. There's a specific style. I think it was
It's called the
something
Orton Gillingham method.
method. And so I was really lucky in that respect.
Yeah.
I will also say though that it was a family decision and they had to talk about it because it was a private school and
That costs
mom
money.
did have to drive me a long way to get there. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
about just
It's
to
not
get
like you're at the same school as all your siblings, one easy drop off. It's a sacrifice. Yeah.
Right.
Do you remember
Yeah.
specifically what are some strategies that they did differently to help you learn?
Yes. Well, first off, they made us learn how to write in cursive, which I know
Instead of
is
printing?
say again?
So instead of printing, you did cursive?
Yes.
That's interesting. Oh,
Something about the way the loops look and how they're all interconnected, it makes for different connections in your brain. I'm
interesting.
not qualified to give
The scientific research.
scientific research on this.
Okay. Do you still write in cursive?
Not really. I know how to, but I
Okay.
don't really have much of a need to.
Okay. Well, maybe you've learned, I wouldn't say grown out of your dyslexia, but you've learned to adapt and maybe you've mastered different areas.
We call it being remediated
Okay.
because you can't get rid of dyslexia. It's
Right.
always going to be a me,
Right.
but you can overcome it in a way that you're able to interact, quote unquote, normally with the rest of the
Right.
world.
Well, you're in grad school right now. So of course, right.
Well, I'm
done a
not in
lot.
for mathematics, though. I do feel like telling you this.
Okay, so what subjects were particularly challenging for you?
Well, English and
Okay.
their reading. And I think I also have a little bit of dyscalculia. We never got that fully tested, but you throw a set of numbers in front of me
Mhm.
longer than 3 digits, and I'm freezing up.
Is
So
it because like when you see that number, you can't like remember the order, or does it in your mind look different?
it's not as much that, it's more like I just don't understand how certain things can cross over, multiply, and there's a lot of memorization. And
Yes.
even though dyslexic children are known for memorizing things, I don't know why, just numbers seem like a completely different language to me.
So what were, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say often kids who are dyslexic also do have trouble with math, although some go on to be great engineers and you know, some have trouble writing. They're just things that sort of, you know, it's like a spirograph. Like there are different things that sort of hit and coexist together. And for John and a lot of the kids he went to school with, numbers were also a problem. And
Yeah.
at the time, this school really did not address that as much, but now they do, because everyone was complaining about the fact that, you know, they're like, okay, great, they can read, it's so amazing, but 2 + 2 is not 5. Like,
Right.
let's figure this out too.
But that's pretty common in dyslexia, right? To have trouble with
Yes.
just basic arithmetic.
Yes.
I'll say just a few of the students who I went to school with during that time. I know one of them does acting and another does aeronautic engineering. So
Wow.
it's a very different mix
Right.
of things here and there.
Right.
Yes.
So like your message is this doesn't have to stop you from doing
No.
what you love. What were some things that maybe because of your dyslexia you excelled at? Is there anything like you explored other areas or anything
Well,
like that?
yes, this is sort of why I called it my superpower, because um without it, I wouldn't have really gotten involved in the art world like I did. When I was younger, I as I I couldn't read, but I was sort of drawn to picture books because I could sort of get a basic gist of the story. What is Pete the cat
Right.
doing here? He's carrying a fish. Okay, I can kind of figure this out. Um, and so that sort of made me want to express myself, not with words, but with art. And
Oh,
so I drew a lot on printer paper and pretty much anything else I could find. And that sort of progressed. Even after I was remediated, I found myself enjoying that, and to the point of wanting to connect my newfound love of reading and writing with that. So if I hadn't been dyslexic, I don't really know. I don't think I'd be where I am now if not for it.
that's so interesting. Like a way to take something that's considered negative and turn it into a positive.
Yes.
So I guess that could lead us to how did the two of you team up to write a children's book?
So during COVID, you know, we did baking, a lot of it, but then we decided, John was home from college and he was an art major. And it's very hard to do art virtually. So
Yeah.
he had a lot of downtime. And at the same time, I was also reading on FaceTime to my grandchildren.
Mm.
And so we started sort of throwing around the idea of we should write a kid's book. And what started as a sort of a joke, you know, sort of started to formulate into a real idea. And you know, what would the character look like? And you know, John loved cars and trains and things as a child, so we thought a car would be good. And what would happen if that car couldn't read the signs and was lost? How would that car figure out how to get from here to there? And we started. That's how we did the book. And John's artwork is amazing, and we co-authored it, and he did all the pictures. And so from there, I have a good friend who is a book designer, and I showed her and I said, "What do you think?" And she's like, "It's adorable." So she helped us package it into a real book. And, you know, yeah, here we are. So
Yay, there it is.
here it
Okay,
is,
and those are all
Robby.
your illustrations.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So did you have to self-publish, or is that the route you
Yes.
took?
We decided because we started asking, and while we had a very positive response to the idea, I think a lot of people were not just baking, but writing stories during COVID. And they said, you could wait and you could try to find an agent, but you'd probably do better self-publishing.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah,
And if
so
that's
that's
an
what
option now, why not? Right?
exactly. And it's been a definite learning experience, but that's what we decided to do. And we'll see. We have some potential interest at some publishing houses, but we're not averse to doing this. It's been a real fun adventure for us. So,
Mhm. Do you have an idea for a second book? Are you thinking about doing more? Because this one, the character is kind of your story, and kids with dyslexia can relate to it. Do you have any other ideas? Maybe they could be secret, or
no, go ahead, Johnny.
All I'll say is we definitely do, and we want to try focusing around other forms of diversity,
Mhm.
specifically like things like dyscalculia or ADHD or, well, any of those
Any of
really.
them. Yeah, I
We
love
just
that.
we decided so Robby works at the Creative Cab Company. So it's going to be the Creative Cab Company. It's going to be a whole series.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah.
Because the title is, what's the title of the first book?
The first book is Robby, the Dyslexic Taxi and the Airport Adventure.
So cute. I
And
love it.
Robby has a usual way of going and then needs to change his plan one day and go a different route. And how is he going to figure that out?
Which
So,
for some kids that are used to their structure and routine, that is
yes,
also a challenge that they have to get out of
exactly.
the comfort zone. Oh, that is awesome. Well, I love this. Can you tell us where we can find your book?
Yeah. So you can buy it on Amazon. Also, we have a website where you can find it some of the local, bookstores. If you go in, they can order it through bookshop.org. We're working on getting it into different places. We're on social media. So if people have questions, we are at the Creative Cab Company, and so is the website. They can DM us or
Love it.
contact us, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Look at you,
about where
grandma on social media pushing her book. I love it.
Thank you. Work in progress.
It's so great. Okay, so
Thank you.
before we wrap up, let's start with Jon. Could you give any words of advice for kids right now that are in your shoes back when you were 7?
I would say don't think you're any less than what you are. I know there are probably a lot of people out there that are telling you you're less, and that can hurt. I realize that, but know that you are special, you are smart, and you don't have to be what everyone says you are. And as long as you find a group, be it family or friends, that will stand by you, they'll be your rock. For me, that was my family. For you, whatever you find, stick with it.
I love that. Okay, and Lynn, what about words of advice for parents that have children that are struggling with dyslexia?
Find your people, in your community. If it's not in school, if it's out in your community or on social media. We've found so many Facebook groups that we're now a part of that we communicate with, and find your people, really, no matter what that means. Just find other people you can talk to, for your sake, for your kids' sake. It's really helpful and I think very important. Go with your gut and honor what your child is telling you and not telling you, and find your people.
Love that. Well, I love what you guys have done, and I can't wait to see how much more success you guys have.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having us. It's been really wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, anyone who has kids needs to run out and go buy that book. I think it is such a wonderful story. And the fact that they co-authored the book and published it is really inspirational for me. And really learning more about dyslexia and what someone's actually going through was very eye-opening. I learned that 1 in 5 people can suffer from dyslexia, and it affects lots of areas of their life, from their memory to reading to problem solving. So knowing kind of the behind the scenes of what someone's going through is really important. And so for kids that aren't suffering from dyslexia or ADHD, to read a book and discover what maybe their classmates are going through is also very important. So run out, go to Amazon, get this book, and spread the word. I love this idea. So I've got some more Momversations coming up next week. So remember to subscribe and follow this podcast. And I will see you again next Friday for another Momversation.